Hey, it's Brad. So, when working with concepts that are too big to hold in your brain all at once, you kind of have to splice it up into different layers, like those images of the old crone and the young lady balancing back and forth. Because if your brain sees an optimization it can make, especially on a small level, unless you're forcing it to keep those separate by putting them in different contexts, it's going to make that optimization. You're going to lose one of the sides, and it's just going to be an attribute of the other side. It's like when you think back to like what you remember about a person. Generally, you're projecting a lot of what you know of yourself because you have things in common. But what you store then is what's different from you of them, and then just memories of specific shared experiences. But these concepts, when it's things that are larger than you could have created in your own mind, then your own mind can't really deal with it all at once unless you kind of like exploring a city. You go down and explore in smaller digestible chunks that you can manage at any given time, and then when looking at a bigger map you can relate your little mini map to the larger portion and see how it all fits together, and then that gets distilled back down in your mind into a more elegant version of a more optimized format. So then it's, if there is kind of a fractal nature to the universe, if there's just a pattern, if there's any sort of a big pattern to everything under the hood, then it's like the big overarching pattern that everything else is a smaller subset of. So you got a projection of that pattern into any context, if that makes sense. Like if you think of encoding a personality as a set of weights and preferences, you go far enough out, you could pretty much encode. I mean, there's the fiddly bits at the end that's always up for the question and another discussion to have. But as far as just a set of weights of, if given this input, this person would respond like that, and becomes a neural network that can just evaluate the same way you would if given enough of the data. But so say there was a perfect decision making process, a perfect AI, that you could, any question, you think, what's the best way to do this? And then you just think for a minute and you figure it out. Because you can think of this, optimal shorthand, mnemonic. Like say there was such a thing and you used it for education. It historically, to my understanding anyway, cultures have pretty much done that with religion. And they've used, imagery of their given pantheon, and they associate each with strong archetypes and passions, drives, spirits, quite literally, like, you get, whether it's a school spirit term or using the sense of like, I'm doing this in the spirit of exploration, or whatever it is. All those different contexts make sense as a concept. Like I think it's Voodoo, Haitian, Creole. Anyway, some sort of voodoo. They focus on the Loa or Loa, these spirits that possess, but not possess like standard ghost possess, but kind of, I think the view is like of riding, of seating on them like a horse, and inhabiting them, residing with them, kind of like an imaginary friend that's a living entity, and possessing them, and they are honored. And anyway, so the concept is all over the place of when your behavior, your decision making is resonating with this paragon archetype. If there's like a simplified form of your worldview where things fit together pretty well. So, like in tribal situation, having a warlike mindset might serve you well. Nowadays, it kind of depends on your situation, but in general, long run, it's not going to. But for the God of a people, and whether you view that to mean one true God telling his people what they need to know to get by, or the spirits of the earth, or pattern recognition and subconscious, or a collective panpsychic, what's the term? Semantic and sentient field, that is, the way that I like to phrase it is like, we don't even get to have a spark in that phrasing. What we are is like the mechs, and we get to define the interface that the spark has. What choices and what experiences are going to happen. We get to define the HUD, but we're just the Cortana. We aren't actually the ones that are experiencing it. We get to have the memory of it, and that's why your memory is never exactly of that moment. Anyway, so that is a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But long story long, the holy grail of mindsets would be one that is as though you were being inhabited or driven by or controlled by or channeling or however inspired by the one best pattern, the one absolute correct pattern, because then all the other are just subsets that you can situationally adjust. And that's kind of my thought of this, fractal approach to things. Because once you fully acknowledge, take as an absolute given that such a pattern does exist, then you can start to use it. It's like, just by knowing it's there, that's a given, that's an assumption that works its way through other things that would have to be the case or have to be in order for that to not be in contradiction with itself. And in exploration of that, I've come across a bunch of really interesting rectifications of different religion, everything all the way down to imagery from the book of Revelation, which I kind of did a double take, is almost word for word a visual description of a scene from the Book of the Dead. And the description of the throne earlier in Revelation is very much in line with so many other afterlife and judgment art out of Buddhist and Vedic imagery and all this other. Anyway, so I'm just trying to rectify all these different views together and what is good about them, if there's some way for them all to actually be correct. And I don't mean throwing out unique and value. I mean looking for the correctness in all of them, including the ones that are hard to question. I'm just trying to rectify the logos and the serendipity, which I love viewing as God making puns.